Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the council meeting for December 12th, 2022. I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda with the addition of the 2023-2027 budget process and public consultation that we just discussed at the finance meeting. With that addition, I will, that will be for ratification. I'll take a motion to approve the agenda. Motion by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, we have two presentations. The first by Mr. Chris Coor from Pivotal IRM. Welcome.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So I was asked by your CAO to bring forward a public presentation on the status of Metchosin Elementary. I was first asked to get involved with this in late 2018 and have been involved really in trying to remanage the building since then. I'll keep this at a fairly high level and then allow questions to go into that depending on Council's needs. So in terms of background, the building was purchased in 2017 for about $1.5 million. I think the best way I can describe it is that the repair is mostly adequate. The school district had done a passable job in maintaining it, but with some deficiencies. And the key issue really with the school is that if you're going to lease it in the open market, it's not really perfectly suitable. The urinals in there, for example, are still for small boys, and that's not necessarily what you need in an office building. So however, the rest of the building, although very much out of date, is fundamentally fairly sound. It totals about 23,000 square feet. There's in addition field space and open space. That includes parking space and other components such as septic tanks and field. In terms of the split between the majority of the building, as most people will know it, the old schoolhouse, which is the one which most people favour, is the part on the top right, as you see the picture there, and most people favour that. So that's about 9,800 square feet odd. That's currently occupied by MACA. I'm assuming that probably everybody in the room knows who MACA are. And then there's the extension, which is a little less beautiful, but nevertheless functional. And that's about 13,000 square feet, plus or minus. And so you've got really a total there of around 23,000 square feet. There was an attempt to lease this after acquisition by basically making it publicly available, but nobody really expressed interest, and it didn't make any progress as a general leasing building. And the reason for that will become obvious with some of the slides to follow, because you'll see the building was not in the very best of leasable conditions. So there was some difficulty attracting tenants without work to improve it. The target became to create a training centre, which was a concept which was advanced by Fire Chief Dunlop. I was asked to look into it. I felt it was sound based on my background looking at provincial assets. And so that was pursued. Of course, there's MACA's use, and then there's general community use as well. So more recently, the district has been successful in securing a $1 million grant for some of the upgrades that are now in progress. But the dominant component of the upgrades that have been done to date have been done through rent-free periods. Now, for those who don't know what they are, I'll explain that. That's basically that when the space is leased, the tenant agrees to take the space on at the rent that they see for the building in front of them, and they get several months worth of rent-free period that they don't pay a rent on, and instead of that it goes into improving the space. They then add their own money on top of that, and that creates, in combination, it creates the capability to improve the space. So you'll see some pictures of this in a minute. It's been quite successful, but what it means is that the district didn't take on the risk and cost of advancing those funds to create the improvements, although it did do some work, and that's largely to overcome some of the disadvantages of the building, some of the physical assets such as roof repairs, some window repairs and so on. By and large, the improvements that you'll see were largely done by the tenants. The building is now fully committed, which is, during COVID, is a fairly significant achievement, whereas a number of buildings were emptying out. This one has actually filled up. So the tenants have renovated the space, and the income is now stabilizing. The ends of those rent-free periods are coming to an end. The rents themselves and the leases themselves do have gearing factors in them, so they will they're now in a fairly good position, or certainly the district is in a fairly good position compared to how it was after absorbing the building into sort of corporate account. For those people who don't know roughly what the building is like, it might help to see this. MACA have, and we had the building remeasured in September, because the nature and area of the building differs when it's in multi-tenanted use compared to single tenant. And so the latest areas are apportioned there. 43% of the building roughly is occupied by MACA. 25% is in the district's control, and the remaining 26% is with Instinct Training, which works in conjunction with the district on allowing access to some of that space, and is used by Chief Dunlop for training purposes. And 6% is for Mile Zero, who've just had their opening, I believe, soft opening, I believe, this weekend, and are finally in operating condition. So that gives you some idea as to roughly what the building is and how it works. The dominant part of the green area is the gymnasium, and works have now commenced on that to renovate it and turn it into a fairly decent community facility. I believe at the end of that there will be improved washroom facilities, communal kitchen facilities, and various other bits and pieces. So it's going to be a fairly significant asset. In context, about a third of the building only is in market rental, and the rest of it is not. So this is the before and after, or selected before and after shots. The top left picture is arguably one of the best of the teaching spaces before renovation. I noticed the linoleum floor and the other components there. So usable but not especially attractive. Underlying that, you can see the flooring conditions were they left a little bit to be desired. At the bottom left corner, all of the classrooms had a separate washroom area and partitioned off, and so these had to be removed in order to make the space usable, because otherwise it detracts from the space, and all of them were. Towards the bottom there in the center, you can see a green part of the walling with a yellow part alongside it. That's at the corner of the picture, which many people probably remember and liked. Unfortunately, when it was put onto the building, it wasn't put on in a way that allowed for the fabric of the building to be guaranteed to be sustained properly. And there were some issues, relatively minor. They were very lucky that it wasn't larger, but you can see there that the siding was splitting off and it was causing water ingress. So that was removed, and what you can see at the bottom right is a significant improvement in the nature of it. It doesn't have the paintings on it, but it's certainly, from a fabric perspective, it's a lot better. That also gives you an indication of roughly how the building has been split. So although the replacement of the walling itself was the district's costs, the tenant paid the costs of putting in the windows and the doorways and satisfying on all of the necessary permits, etc. That's going to be an area in summer for people to go out and sit, including for tenants of the rest of the building. So in this one, you can see top left, that was actually the before condition for Mile Zero's space, and you can see down below it immediately what that's been turned into, largely at their cost, but obviously with an extended rent-free period from the district to partly compensate for that. So you've gone from really an asset which is passable but not especially modern to something that's really very modern. And when the rents are reviewed, those finishes will be the district's possession. They're yours. And so the rent will rise at that point. It was originally leased, however, at the picture top left. So you get less rent initially, but you get a higher rent when the rent review comes through. In the middle you can see the corridor space, both before and after. That's partly during renovation. I'm sorry if I'm blocking some people's view over here. And you can see what was done in terms of putting in new flooring, different paintings and finishing in the corridor. So it's changed it from something which is a little redolent to something which is considerably more attractive. The top right bunch of 3 photographs, you can see the before picture just after the linoleum was removed, but basically you can see what the room looked like. And the 2 pictures underneath that or what it looks like today. The bottom picture is in its use as classroom, and the middle picture is in the district's use of the space, which was as a COVID injection site. And so the district is able to use the instinct training space about, I believe, 18% of the time. It works out at is the district's use, in addition to the other space which is exclusively the district's use, which is the gymnasium. And so in summary, the initial building challenges are now largely overcome. It's not completed yet, and it will be ongoing for some time still. But there's a particular point has been reached at this time, and that is that the costs of operating and maintaining the building are exceeded by the income being received from the tenants. And so from a taxpayer's perspective, the building should now not be a drain on the district's budgets. The new leases that have been put in place are largely to 2025. They start from August going through to December. Mac's is a little different from the other leases, but they're basically the same. And so that break even means that you're financially in a different position. So in terms of, is the $1.5 million investment worthwhile or not, it's really for council to decide. The advantages that you get with that, or what you've essentially pre-purchased, is that you have reduced training costs for the fire department. Instead of sending staff away, they're trained on site, and also you have income and improved training because you're doing that in conjunction with other organizations. So there's a significant benefit that's not shown in any of the rents. It's quite separate. You do have a revitalized facility, and you'll be able to take advantage of that when the leases fall due. In terms of the space that you control, either through MACA as a community use or through the gym or other space, I've equated that out, and if that was to be leased on a market basis, it would be roughly the same as $188,000 a year. Essentially, you've prepaid that by buying the space for $1.5 million. And so that's roughly the same as about a 10-year simple payback. So if you were to repay your investment, then in 10 years' time, that's the equivalent, but you'd have to pay a market rent. So essentially what you've done is you've gained an advantage, and that really is from a financial perspective, but you've gained additional advantages because you've got the parking, the fields, the open space, and you've preserved the village core by controlling this. In terms of the assessed value, it might help you to understand BC Assessment Authority's got an assessed value on it at $2.79 million. I don't know that they're necessarily right, and I think that's worthy of appeal at the next go round, but nevertheless, that's what the statement is, $2.79 million. So essentially you can start to see that you have got an improved asset. It's started to turn the corner. Those works will continue. Particularly with the grant renovation works, which I believe are due to complete somewhere February, March time, and some other remedial works. You will need to carry on, obviously, with updating the management plan and budget and general long-term maintenance of the building, but otherwise it's turned a corner and is now paying for itself. I hope that helps, and pass it back to you.
Okay. Does any of council have any questions you'd like to ask at this point?
I do have a question.
No? Oh, sorry. Councillor Shukin, go ahead.
Thanks very much, Chris, for the presentation. And again, just compliments and kudos to Councillor Epp and Fire Chief Dunlop for all the work they've done to get tenants in the building and get it to where it is now. Could you clarify the status of the parking lots and the fields in terms of the leases and the school site and all that?
So the first thing is the district does control them. In terms of the allocation of spaces, MACA has 15 of the parking spaces. Instinct has 1, although it's the larger portion. And Mile Zero has 2, but one of those is available for others to use because it's essentially reserved as a delivery bay. So there's 1 each only for each of those tenants, 15. So that's 18 total spaces dedicated, and the rest are run as scramble parking. And the reason to use scramble parking is it's the most efficient way of managing a building of this nature, where you've got differential parking arriving and going, rather than having a dedicated space which nobody can access. So I think if I would make a suggestion, it would be to move more towards scramble parking, including for the MACA space, rather than have those spaces sterilized and nobody in them in a particular day. That would be a great advantage. In terms of the long term, the 2 parts of the field are the upper area, which is reserved really for the septic field, and you can't really touch that. People have tried to put parking on septic fields and it never works well. You'll have a crisis. The lower field is more usable. It's more accessible from the general parking area. You have also alongside that the extended tarmac-addamed area, some of which is fenced off. I think if that was remanaged, then you would have a significant increase in potential parking there, and I think it's also feasible to use some of that area to provide a better access point to the gymnasium, and it'll be more obvious to the community where to go to get into the gymnasium. So there's a couple of areas there where, with some remanagement, I don't know what the cost would be, but it will alleviate what I anticipate will be an increasing pressure on parking. I don't believe at the moment, from what I've heard, anybody's parking on the street. But as the businesses there do get busier, you'll find increasingly that needs to be managed.
Go ahead.
Thanks for the presentation, Chris. I wonder if you could just clarify the lease terms. It's 5 years to start, and then at the discretion of the tenants, they could take another 5 years?
Yes, the tenants are on fairly strict. These are what's called a standard institutional lease, and essentially these are fairly standard globally types of leases from an investment perspective. So from a landlord's perspective, and that's you, the rent is received net. So if you've got any cost for the building, you get to charge them to the tenants. Those standard institutional leases, a common way of dealing with them is, certainly in North America, less so in Europe, but in North America is a 5-year initial lease and the ability for them to renew it. They can only do so on strict terms though, and one of those is that they have to meet the commitments in the initial lease. If they don't, then there's a valid reason to not allow them to be extended, but it is then at their discretion. They would have to give that notice 6 months prior to term.
Okay, anybody else? Okay, thank you very much. That was very helpful.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Okay, and next up we have Jim MacPherson from the Museum Society. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you very much for the opportunity for me to make this brief presentation. As president and on behalf of the Metchosin Museum Society, I take this opportunity to respectfully request a simple renewal of our current lease on current terms. This should allow for sufficient time to consider and evaluate the wisdom of the proposed change. At the same time, we also draw to your attention that time is of the essence. Our current lease terminates December 31st, and in the absence of any lease, we will, because of liability issues, close our doors until a new lease is finalized. Hence the urgency of acting on a renewal of the current lease. The Metchosin Museum Society is responsible for the Schoolhouse Museum, the Pioneer Museum, and Old Barn Books. The Society is broadly based and with a remarkable level of community support. This support is illustrated by the public reception at the opening celebration of the Schoolhouse Museum and the incredibly positive reviews of the work done both inside and outside of the museum. For its part, the Pioneer Museum has received many compliments from visitors local and abroad in terms of expressing surprise at the scope and quality of the artifacts and presentation. Another example of community support for the Museum Society is Old Barn Books. The Old Barn Books is the Museum Society's primary source of revenue for ongoing enhancements to the Pioneer Museum and for routine maintenance and upkeep of both museums. All of this has been made possible by many committed and dedicated volunteers. Our 63 members reside primarily in Metchosin, but a few members live in other municipalities within the CRD. Many of our visitors attend the Farmers Market, Metchosin Cafe, Broken Paddle, farm stands, and local businesses. I am here tonight to express our surprise at the proposed new contract terms for the Museum Society's license of occupation for the Pioneer Museum. There has been very limited discussion about the proposed renewal, and the agenda package makes a note of a single discrepancy between older and newer maps. The Museum Society agrees that there is a discrepancy, but that the proposed renewal stipulated the removal of 3 meters from the west side of the Pioneer Museum property line and reducing the land area there from our current contract of 8 meters to 5 comes as a complete surprise. And our question is, why the change? Our lease is a legal document, and it forms the basis for all of our planning, of which has been undertaken in good faith. As a society, we want to look at and plan for the future through our museums. We are committed to finding ways to make Metchosin more attractive for the people who live here. This includes planned renovations for the Pioneer Museum. For example, we're considering alternatives for the protection and display of agricultural artifacts on the west side of the museum. And although planning is in early stages, it's our intention that in due course to present this plan to Council for its approval, and work would be done by ourselves. The Society's use of the west side of the Pioneer Museum focuses on the display of agricultural artifacts. Many of our artifacts represent the agricultural history of Metchosin farmers. These artifacts require appropriate care in terms of how they are handled and displayed. They are part of the heritage of Metchosin and should be treated with respect and honor of Metchosin's early pioneers and the agricultural community. Our planning is now in jeopardy because of the change in the district's proposed renewal. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Jim. Did Council have anything, any questions you'd like to ask at this point? Go ahead, Councillor Gray.
Jim, who are the members of the executive?
Judith Van Manen, Bert Harrison, Bob Burgess, Ed McLean, John Bars, Sheila Mitchell, and Susie Bowen.
Okay. Anybody else have any questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Okay, presentations are over. We're moving to public participation. 4 minutes per person. Please welcome Leslie. State your name and your street.
Hi, I'm Leslie Zinger. I'm the current president of the Metchosin Equestrian Society, just newly elected a couple of weeks ago, and I live down on Woody Beach Road. I am concerned about the municipal barn license occupation occupation or changing the lease. I did some research quickly because I just got back from Vegas 2 days ago, so I read the minutes here. And I am concerned because I was previous president in late 1998, 96, when we had some conflicts with the old barn about where or what the distance should be between that one wall where all the agricultural equipment is. At that time, as president, we decided it was not safe, and Larry Trombley and I decided that the 5 meters with a picket fence is where the actual property line should have been. So they did put up a picket fence. I think primary concern is safety, and when you have horses and equipment and other things going on, we have to keep that up front in all what we do down there. And I think the Metchosin Equestrian Society has done a great job with safety concerns. My concern with if it's when I looked at all these things, Metchosin Equestrian Society did sign a lease on August 2021 up for 2026, and it indicates it's 5 meters. I did some research from 2006, 2008. It has always been the 5 meter distance. And I understand about the wagon, whatever. It used to be displayed on the other side where the market is. I personally think that would be a more logical place because that's where all the pedestrians are currently walking around. When there are horse events, having pedestrians walking around between horse trailers and horses is just a situation that could end up in a disaster, especially with children. So I am questioning why one lease would overrule another lease. Like we have, as a society, have our lease till 2026. It does say, and it was approved by council and the municipal sign-off person. So I was just curious.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Anybody else wish to speak?
Hi, Jill Armstrong, Lysandra Road. I noticed in the museum's 2020-2022 lease agreement, the drawing shows 8 meters beside the museum instead of 5. This must have been a clerical mistake, as I'm sure our club would have been consulted and notified of any changes, plus our lease has not changed. This driveway and parking area are absolutely vital to our club. Most public parking areas for horse trailers or RVs allow the driver to pull in straight and back into the parking spot in a straight angle or straight way. We have to back up at a right angle, watching out for other trucks, trailers, horses, and the fence, not to mention people. I have a truck, but only a 2-horse trailer, and I have just enough room when the front of my truck is straightening out. I am inches from that picket fence. I'm thankful that all the activities for the public are on the far side of the museum and the grandstands. It's absolutely vital we don't encourage the public into an active driveway parking lot. It's just too dangerous, especially with a rig trying to maneuver and back up into a tight space. It's also important the public is discouraged from entering the horse trailer parking area where horses are tied to trailers. This is an issue of safety for the public, our members, and accessibility for trailer parking. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Jill. Anybody else?
Hello, Gary Smurfett on Gilbert Drive. I'm not concerned about offsets here and there in those agreements, but what I am concerned about is that none of them make any mention as who pays for the utilities that these facilities use, and there's mentions of repairs, but it doesn't, there's no definition between what's a repair and what's maintenance. And then the agreements make reference to maintenance, to a maintenance schedule, but the maintenance schedules aren't attached to the agreements. Okay? And I think really those agreements need to be looked at a bit more carefully, especially if we're looking at them for 5 years, and you can see there's already concerns about offsets and things like that. So I would suggest that maybe council take its time on this. I realize there's concerns from the agencies, but I think more attention has to be paid to the details in them. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good evening, folks. Chris Moore, 4545 William Head Road, current president of APRM. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the executive and the membership of APRM, although I will clearly state that it is not being consolidated as yet, but that's the sense. I'm here tonight to speak to an important looming issue for Metchosin, and that is the ultimate fate of what we refer to as our buffer lands that lies between us and the soon-to-be business park and the high-density residential development on Langford's portion of the Center Mountain land swap. I suggest that the fate of this 112 parcel is of significant consequence, not only to adjacent Metchosin residents, but also to our entire community. There is also, I've certainly observed in others, a growing vision within this community that this parcel should be put to the, well, the industry term is highest and best use, but it doesn't apply, but in accordance with obvious climate change. Of course, we could always do what we have historically done under different times, and that's to turn the whole thing into parkland, with no doubt an extensive trail system running through it. As a point of interest, we already have over 8 kilometers of Metchosin trails, and that's excluding the Galloping Goose. Our question is, who exactly, if something like that should happen, would it serve? Would it not be a better goal to place it under conservation protection, that is, as a complete hands-off holding for carbon sequestering and a wildlife corridor in perpetuity? And as it happens, I think some of you might be aware of this, and it could not be more timely. A recently announced funding opportunity under Environment and Climate Change Canada, which was reported in the October issue of the Globe and Mail, has become available. Now this, I understand, is very similar to the grants in lieu, whereby a local government that dedicates suitable lands under a conservation covenant is entitled to ongoing compensation. I fully appreciate the magnitude and number of issues currently facing all of you as our council, but here's an opportunity to shine, and not only as mayor and council, but as a caring, visionary, and sensitive community. Our request is therefore that you take a lead role with the support of staff to explore this opportunity in detail. Don't let this one go by. Thank you.
Thank you. I will speak to this just because there's so much interest in this. We are moving forward. As you know, we're a new council. We've got new councillors at the table. Councillor Shukin, led by Councillor Shukin and supported by Councillor Donaldson, they're moving forward with discovering options for the buffer land. They're just coming up to date with what we have there, what were our commitments, what are the agreements, and they will be bringing it forward for a public consultation process. More on that will be on an upcoming community planning meeting agenda. Okay. Thank you for the suggestions, Chris. Go ahead. Yeah.
Sorry, I just wanted to comment on one point that Chris made, and it was around carbon offsets from forest resources. And this is the second time I've heard this in a very short time. and it's interesting. I think you need a lot of forest to make it actually worthwhile, and with that, a lot of administration. But it's an interesting concept, and I suspect we're going to be hearing more about it. Whether Metchosin takes the lead, I'm not sure, but it might be interesting to sign on with others or get connected with other groups who might tackle the problem about how to account for this and receive revenue. So thank you.
Councillor Gray.
And just to say, at our last meeting, I'd suggested that the Environment Committee might be looking at this on December 19. We've moved things over to the Planning Committee, but it'll still be December 19, the next report on that, I believe.
Okay. And the MEASC, the Metchosin Environmental Advisory Select Committee, and PTASC have been tasked with coming back with recommendations. That was in the last council. They submitted those, and so all of that information will be gathered for us moving forward. And we won't be deciding on any one particular option until the public is fully engaged and has an opportunity to weigh in. You have our word on that. Okay. Scene. Oh.
Patty Whitehouse, 5311 Rocky Point Road, and I left my notes in the washroom when I had my coughing fit, and thank you, Tina, for rescuing me. So I'm going to have to do my best, but from memory. In recent council meetings, there have been several questions with respect to council procedure that arose. Some examples are whether or not it would be appropriate for council to sign a declaration that originated with a non-governmental organization. How do appointments to community committees that are not council committees, how should they be handled? And whether councillors could come to the mayor's open house given the very strict rules regarding quorum. Now, I don't expect council members to be experts or have an encyclopedia knowledge of council procedure. It's complex, there's an awful lot of it, it's not intuitive. But you have somebody at the council table with you whose job it is to advise you on matters of this nature. Our interim CAO, if she doesn't know the answer, will know where to find it. So I'd like to respectfully suggest that that be your first strategy when a question of council procedure that you don't know the answer to arises. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Ellen Dewar, 4809 Eels Road. I've been a member of MES since about 2006, past secretary for several years and president 1 year. I attended a meeting with several members of Metchosin Equestrian and the Museum Society in late August.
Just if you could hold.
Yep.
Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
At that time, we discussed the additional 3 meters of leased area on the west side of the museum space. And my first thought was, how could this 3-meter space appear on both our existing lease with the district as well as on the museum's lease? Upon viewing the museum's lease from 2017 to 2019, their lease only covered 5 meters to the existing picket fence to the west side of their building. Therefore, I assumed that the current lease must have been in error because it went from 5 meters to 8 meters. So over all these years, MES has assumed that that space was our space for parking, and now all of a sudden it seems to have changed. I understand that the museum, I understand their conundrum and they want additional space. We had suggested to them that perhaps they could move their stuff on the covered area side where there's more, people and action and everything. Because on our side, it's really important that we keep horses and trailers and all that stuff separate. And also, trailer parking is very tricky on that side because really we just barely have the minimum space that we need to park trailers safely. And it's very tricky because you have to angle park, and some of our rigs are bigger, and sometimes they have a camper on, and it's hard to see, and it's quite challenging. They did make a proposal to us about realigning the parking there. I mean, we could certainly do a demonstration and show people just what we're faced with there, but you know, I don't know how to be fair about this, but as far as I know, our lease has always covered that space, so I don't know where this suddenly came from, and I'm very concerned about it because I think it would be really detrimental to our club and all, you know, any events that we have there. Okay, thank you. I do have a letter from Bev Bacon as well, and I don't know if I can read that on her behalf.
Yes.
Okay, this is from Bev. I'm sure that the Pioneer Museum has a valid reason for wanting to enlarge their space. Unfortunately, encroaching on the horse trailer parking area would be unsafe and unwise. I speak as a long-term member of MES over 20 years and a past president. I remember when enlarging the Pioneer Museum space in our direction was discussed previously. The discussion was amicable, but the decision was firm, as it should be this time. There is no spare room in the horse trailer parking lot that we could give up. We cannot agree to making it more difficult and hazardous for backing up and maneuvering big rigs, especially when excited horses and riders, some of them children, are in the mix. Let's remember that also that in Metchosin's emergency plan, the riding ring is the destination and holding area for evacuated horses. If we had more space, it would be desirable for us to build pens for that purpose. We have previously discussed the need for parents, spectators, and riders waiting to compete to have a covered area to stand in when riding lessons and events are taking place in the ring. We didn't find space for such a shelter that doesn't have the potential to be an obstruction. Safety is of paramount importance. The importance of keeping the laneway and turning room clear cannot be overestimated. I hope that the Pioneer Museum Society can achieve its goals in another way. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen.
Thank you.
Hi there, Kelly Twardick, Metchosin community member. I'd just like to concur with Leslie, Bev, and Ellen regarding the horse trailer parking. And my suggestion would to be look at Saanich Fairground and where they put their displays and where they have their horse parking, and it's far, far, far away for safety reasons. And the same with Luxton. If you're to look at Luxton Fairgrounds, you would see that all of the exhibits are inside and far away from horses. It's very dangerous parking big rigs, and I'd just like to concur to really take a look at this.
And your address, just your street?
Metchosin.
Metchosin Road?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else?
Jennifer Burgess, 3837 Duke Road. I may have a small bias since I'm not on the board, but I am actively working for the museum at the moment. And I'm standing up here to, I think, bring up the sentence of something called good neighbors. I have watched some amazing things happen in the Museum Society in the last 2 years. I'm sure you have too. And you have a fabulous new schoolhouse developed. So I have a feeling that your museum board has high capabilities and high integrity. And over the last few years, there have been several developments that have been of big assistance, I think, to the equestrian group. For instance, the Museum Society, if you didn't know, maintains the power and pays for the power of anything that the Equestrian Society uses because they're connected to the main museum power grid. Plus, at one point in time, there was quite a decision made about a fence that went towards the road, and it was divided to allow easier access for horses, right, to get onto the trails beside Happy Valley Road. So I think there's lots of room here to sit down and really think about this. there are possibly other municipal property lands that trailers could be parked on after they're emptied. That's one question. How you empty them. I have actually had an Arabian horse for 2 years, but in a different country. So I can't really say how it would be managed here in this parking area. But I just think there is room here for a bit of consideration on both sides to come up with a really good answer that suits both of these organizations. So, thank you.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to give an opportunity to the Metchosin Equestrian Society. Did you want to comment on the amount of power that horses would use in the riding ring and at the grandstand per year? I have calculated that myself, but I'd like you to comment on that. And would you be willing to pay that nominal fee to the to the Museum Society? Leslie.
Leslie Zinger, president of the Metchosin Equestrian Society. I do remember years ago, late 90s, having that discussion with the current board of the Barn Museum, and it was calculated, and I do remember it was a nominal amount of electricity that was used for the speakers pretty well. So I'm sure it has gone up a little with the price of hydro, but I'm sure, depending on what that nominal fee is, it would be a consideration. Like, I mean, I don't see, you know, we could raise money, have a, you know, a can, throw your money in here for the power. I mean, you know, it's not unrealistic thing.
I think I calculated it to be about $64 a year.
Yeah, like it was nominal then, and then I think that time Larry was on the board of the old barn, and it was more of a nightmare for the tracking of their records, so it was dropped.
But you would be willing
to pay that? But we had made that offer in the 90s to pay that when that
and the offer still stands.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else? Any of the other questions want to remark about that? Councillor Gray.
Well, just on that point, it didn't seem that the Museum Society was asking for payment. They're just rather saying that's going on right now, and their cooperation between the groups exists. So I appreciate all the information.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Kathy Atherton, 4995 Le Bon Road. I just want to say that in the past, the Equestrian Society has actually, I thought, had very good relations with the Museum Society, and Larry Tremblay had been very cooperative and instrumental with us when we had put water out to the grandstand, and also he'd assisted getting electricity out there. And in terms of how often does it get used and how much draw is there, I don't know. I would suggest maybe we have 6 events a year, and you know, basically all it is a loudspeaker and sometimes you know, plug in for coffee machines or something. It's really not a huge draw, but you know, I would expect that the society would be very happy to pay whatever was required for it. I hope I'm not speaking out of turn. And 3 meters might not sound like a big amount of space when you look at the size of the whole municipal grounds. I'm not driving trailers anymore, but I know when I was, and mine was just a 2-horse trailer, it still felt like you were always having to be really aware of what was going on around you and maneuvering, you know, with your trailer there, etc. And you know, and the space really is valuable, because the grass area in the back is also not always firm during the winter time, and if you need to park there, sometimes you have to pull a bit more forward onto the gravel, so you're not you know, going onto the sort of muddier grass field, because there's not a good surface there. And the suggestion to possibly park your trailer there and then move it once you'd unloaded your horse, it might sound simple if you're not somebody who's involved with horses, but if you are involved with horses, you realize that all your tack is in there, and your horse feed is in there, and your utensils to pick up and clean up after your horse are in there, and it's really not realistic to be trying to saddle your horse there and then have to go and tie it somewhere else when you go and move your trailer at that point before you can go and ride. So as far as I'm concerned, that is not any kind of an option to be able to move your trailer once you've actually unloaded your horse from the trailer. And another point Mr. MacPherson brought up was that there is a timeline for them for getting the lease signed and sealed by December 31st, and that they will have liability issues and have to close down the museum if it's not signed by that time. And I would say take a breath and take a little time to consider this if you need to, because it's not as if the farmers market is going on. There's nothing incredibly active right now. If there was time to deliberate and get parties on site until when farmers market opens, or even sort of March or April, I think there is time to actually look at this if it is an issue that you feel needs to be addressed. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Would you like to speak again?
Just a point of clarification, Old Barn Books is open every Sunday. This does not tie with the farmers market.
Okay. Okay, anybody else wish to speak this evening?
Yeah, I will. Stella French, 4481 Leafield Road. I have no notes because I wasn't planning on speaking because I have no solutions. As a good neighbor, I understand 100% that you need the space. I also understand, as the driver of a big rig, we need the space, and I don't have a solution at all. I'm not part of the executive of MES. I'm a member. I'm helping to maintain the ring. I'm a coach there that uses the facility, and I'm a rider there that uses the facility. I can speak to, if we didn't have those 3 meters, I wouldn't be able to bring my students there. I participated in some of the events where we did overflow parking up here against the back property line. Terrifying bringing horses through the crowd. There's good reasons you don't see horses anymore in parades and other public events. There's just too great a liability. It's not worth the risk is the word that was going to come out. It's actually not doable. It is not a viable option. I do know that during the risk management analysis that happened with the MES in the last couple of years, the actual parking space that is grass and gravel right now that is in discussion had to be reinsured because of the driving activities that happen, as in horse and cart. Trying to be sensitive to the history and all of the disciplines of the equestrians in this society. I mean, maybe someday one of our horses could pull that rig for you, I don't know. But yeah, again, no solutions, just that that space is often 360 days of the year seems to be empty, but the couple of days a year that it does need to be full, actually every Tuesdays when we do ride there, it's pretty full of 8 horse trailers plus. But anyway, we seem to take up a lot of space, but that kicking leg can go a long way. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrying the load here. I wasn't going to speak, but I first of all want to say to all the equestrians out there, I can see and feel how passionate you are about your riding, your horses, your space. And I'm really a new person to Metchosin compared to probably most of you here. We bought property in 2004 and began living here in 2007 once we retired from Edmonton. I've been a director of the museum board for over a year now. I'm also the curator. I've become the curator of the Schoolhouse Museum, which we're very proud of, and worked very, very hard in the last year with that and with the Native Teaching Garden, which I hope you've all had a chance to look at. I just want to speak about museums because there's been so much passion about equestrian and their society. And, you know, often people don't get involved in museums until they're retired, until they're old, and we would love to change that demographic. But I got involved. These two museums, the Pioneer and the Schoolhouse Museum and the Barn Books, they really contribute to the uniqueness of Metchosin. They really do. I must say there's no other agency in Metchosin that preserves the value of the rural community and history as much as the Museum Society does with our two museums. And probably equestrian people can agree with me on that, because it has to do with the space we're occupying. But we want to improve this Pioneer Museum. It needs to be improved. We need to expand. We are a public institution. We're not a private club. We belong to Metchosin. And in our Constitution, we preserve, exhibit, and interpret materials and artifacts pertaining to the history and the development of Metchosin. I mean, we're essential to this community. And you know, I'm a volunteer. Hundreds of hours have gone into this Schoolhouse Museum in the last year. I don't get paid, either do all the other volunteers. What I'm concerned about is that volunteers like me, we count on you, on you, councillors. We count on the administration. We count on our district to support our endeavors at this museum, to keep it alive and thriving. So I just had to share that passion that, you know, I'm deeply committed to keeping these alive and improving and becoming more central than they already are to this community. Thank you.
Judith Van Mennen, and your road is?
I'm on Olympic View Drive.
Olympic View Drive, thank you.
Right by the Lagoon Trail in beautiful Metchosin.
Okay, thank you.
Just want to say one more thing. Jill Armstrong. I think I can't remember exactly the year that the riding ring was built, but there was a very small group of us, Sherry and Al and my husband, and the Lions Club, basically, they started this for the children of Metchosin. So I can't, if we talk about, you know, being part of a rural community, you can't get much more rural than artifacts and horses, right? So I'm just really hoping we can work this out. But what confuses me is, if space is that important, why did the museum give up their covered area? Why are they not putting all their artifacts in their 3 meters on that side of the, I know the farmers market uses it, but if the museum is more integral to Metchosin than the market, then they have that space, it's covered. And I just don't understand why that's not being utilized. I just don't understand that. So that's all I want to say.
Thank you.
Ed McLean, 5225 Rocky Point Road. I'm a member of the Museum Society, and I'm on the board of directors. I'd like to look at this whole scenario from a different perspective here. The Equestrian Society, very valuable service to the community. Museum Society, the same. What is at issue here from my perspective? I'll take my hat off as a board member now and just be a member of the public, is that we have two parties here. Party A has a lease which is about to expire. That lease states a number of 8 meters. Also, an old document states 5 meters. The Equestrian Society has a document which shows on a map, felt penned, 5 meters from the corner, and another number on it at the far end of 37.25 meters. Any lease that I have ever been involved in regarding land has detailed dimensions of each and every boundary. Last weekend, I did a whole bunch of measurements, looking at the drawings, and found that the Pioneer Museum is not parallel to the boundary on that side. Their only measurements that I saw were an area of parking lot 37 feet by 107 feet, which is to be used jointly, not under the sole discretion of the Equestrian Society. The boundary and start point of that is edge of gravel boundary and grass. Upon measuring, I found that that gravel line was indeed parallel to the fence line at about 63 feet. When you measure 37 feet from that point, you do hit the corner fence post where the picket fence currently is. There, I'm assuming, and I know what that word means, that the Equestrian Society's width through there is 100 feet. So currently, if you were to measure that 37 feet and parallel to the fence, you have 5 meters at the back corner to the museum building. But because the museum isn't indeed parallel, that number at the front end happens to be about 8 meters. What is up for discussion here is not whether the museum deserves 8 meters or whether it should be 5. It's we have a overlap in 2 legal documents. Does anybody truly know where the numbers are? A felt pen on here, one of the boundaries is edge of gravel on this side. That could change. We at the Museum Society, we want to keep Old Barn Books open. We don't want to have to close. We do not want anything like that. We need something in place so we can carry on. However, council in their wisdom decides to do that. But I do believe that there needs to be an accurate measurement of exactly where the Equestrian Society lease actually is. Ask yourselves, how did the error in the 2 documents occur? That is, to me, what is at question here. We have 2 legal documents. Which one is correct? And I do not believe that council can, on the renewal of one lease, just changes it to suit the numbers, which may or may not be correct. Upon looking at all of the maps of all of the properties, the map that I saw in the Equestrian Society, you can't scale it. If you count, I counted the number in, and this is in the map done by McElhaney, the number of fence posts that are on the question on the riding ring don't match what there actually is. You can't actually do it, and I'll just state that I believe we need to find out exactly where these legal documents are. All the rest of it is a moot point in my mind at this point in time. We got to find out what is right and what isn't in those documents. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, seeing that we've exceeded the 40. Okay. If you'd like to say something, if you could keep it to 4 minutes.
Bob?
I
can be a lot briefer than that. I concur exactly with what Ed McLean has said. It seems to me that what really the issue is here is what do we do right now so the museum can stay open. It seems to me that from what I'm hearing, you're going to have to get the whole area surveyed properly, and there'll be all sorts of other stuff having to be done that can't be done between now and the end of the year. I would propose that you consider giving us a temporary occupancy for 6 months, a year, you pick the number, while the discussions are going on, and also a temporary license for the same period of time, during which time the proper surveys, all the proper discussions can take place, and presumably we can come up with a resolution that'll work for everybody. Okay, thanks.
So Bob Burgess, Duke Road.
Oh, Bob Burgess, 30, yeah, that's right. Now I remember. Yeah, Bob Burgess, 3837 Duke Road.
Thank you.
Now you know where to go.
Okay, that's it for public participation. We'll move on to the rest of the meeting. Thank you, everybody, for turning out to this meeting. It was a great discussion. Okay, adoption of the minutes. Move to page 3 of your agenda. This is the council meeting of December 5th. Could I have a motion to approve the minutes? Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Discussion?
There's a typo on page 3. In the middle down there, it's not Eric Vanderwater, but Aaron Vanderwater.
Okay. Anything else?
So I move the minutes be amended to reflect that.
Okay. So moved. Did you want to say something? No. No. Okay, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the mayor's report. Okay, I've 2 things to say. Number 1, Councillor Gray has been appointed to the Maryhill IPA Steering Committee. And number 2, regarding the mayor's open house coffee tea session, that will be later this month. I think it's the 20th. What we've decided to do is to avoid issues and concerns about quorum. Whoever is the acting mayor at the time will be invited to that coffee tea session along with the mayor and the members of the public. And since the acting mayor is rotated, everybody will get a chance. Okay? And then let's see what else. And I'll have a written report next time for the mayor's report. Regarding business arising, we have 7A. This is a carryover from the Finance Committee. So turn back to your Finance Committee report of 7B on page 1 of the Finance agenda. So we would like ratification of that. That is the 2023-2027 budget and public consultation schedule. On page 9, if you need a reminder, that was a report brought back forward by our interim CFO. Okay, so if I could have a motion to ratify that.
So moved.
Moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Call the question. Or did anybody want to say anything? No? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Thank you. Great. Okay. Okay, what everybody's here to discuss. Let's discuss this. This is the reports for action, page 9 of your council. I'd like to preface this by saying We have two community groups. Both are highly valued in this community. Neither of them are private clubs. They're both societies. They both have unique characteristics towards our rural identity, and I appreciate both, and I think all of you will know from my previous Facebook posts and my advocacy at the Parks Committee that I support both of those groups 100%. And I acknowledge all the work that has been put into the Metchosin Museum Society, in particular the old schoolhouse. It is a remarkable achievement. So what we have here is we have finite space. That's just a way to put it. We have finite space there between the fence and the barn. How I see it, and I like to deal with what is written on paper, was we had two lease agreements that stated there were 5 meters from the barn to the fence, and then and there were 2 lease agreements that said 5 meters. All of a sudden, there was a lease agreement that said 8 meters on one, but not on the other. At the same time, the lease agreement for the Metchosin Equestrian Society was renewed with that map, not with a consultation process or discussion that actually you may only have a certain amount there, less the 3 meters. And so what I'm dealing with is I'm asking these both groups to collaborate and to cooperate and to be good neighbors. That doesn't mean saying this is how you should park your rigs or this is how you should display your artifacts. I'd like collaboration. So on page 9 of your council agenda, we have a little bit of background there. Everybody's had a chance to read. We've got a discussion here on the municipal barn license of occupation. What has been proposed is that council approve this for a 1 year. This is in keeping in mind that what I'm told, and you can correct me, that any plans to change the footprint of the barn and putting shovels into the ground would be 3 or 4 years out. And so it wouldn't be within this next year. So I would appreciate it, and I would actually encourage council to approve the 1 year lease, one year renewal of the lease, and that would give us more time to do other assessments and hopefully come to some conclusion. But of course, there's 4 of you at the table, and I'd like to hear from each of you how you'd like to proceed. Councillor Gray.
Well, I'd be happy to make a motion that we council approve a 1 year renewal on the same terms as exist today.
On the same terms that exist today. So this is a 1 year renewal of the existing lease. Okay, moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Councillor Shukin. Okay, sorry. This is moved by Councillor Gray. Would anybody like to second this motion? Okay, seeing none, that motion does not carry. We'll move on to more discussion. Go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Little. I am going to speak in support of option 1, which is the renewal of the lease agreement for 1 year with a 5 meter setback from the building. Now, first of all, before I get into this, I do want to thank all of the executive of the Museum Society, Bert and Ed, John, Judith, and Bob, and especially for Jim. Now, I've had a chance over the last few weeks to talk with Jim about this, and one of the things that has come up, of course, is the passion and the interest with preserving Metchosin's heritage. The other thing that has come up is that planning is at a very rudimentary stage. Now, with that, I believe there's no issue, there should not be an issue in doing a 1 year lease agreement that allows operations to continue as they are. and also allows for the possibility of discussion with the Metchosin Equestrian Society on, on a goodwill basis, of course. One of the things, of course, I did have a chance to go through the information package and even before getting the agenda package. The last lease agreement that was signed appears to be anomalous from what the measurements have been on the grounds prior. And I'm not really clear on the basis of the 8 meters and why that decision was made or why it should go back to that right now. The one thing, again, if we can have this lease agreement approved and signed, it may allow us to go back, is, as Ed was saying, look at doing additional measurements to get clarity. We probably do have to keep an eye on cost in terms of doing that, though. But again, renewing the lease agreement, allowing time for discussion, and also for planning on the museum's part, to me is in order. Okay. And before I put forward the motion, I'm happy to do so. It'd be interesting to hear from other councillors as well. Okay. Thank you.
Councillor Donaldson.
Yes, I want to thank everybody that actually weighed in on this conversation from both of the societies. I'm down at that property a couple days a week. I coach on the weekend as well. I have watched for years the amount of energy and excitement and plans that go into the museum, and where it's come in at least the 20 years that I've been watching that. Probably in the last 15 years since that little picket fence went up, and parking my rig in and out of there, as I am equestrian as well. Both of these organizations offer a lot to our community. That's clear. Somebody had said, and there has been not a lot of open dialogue, which is kind of unfortunate. But through the years, each have helped in different ways. When the electricity went in, we hired an electrician. We put out a tender for that. We got grants. We did fundraising, that sort of thing. Or not we, because I was still kind of new at it, but the club did. And I'm speaking on the archives that I have been looking at when this came up last summer, early fall. And I couldn't find any invoices, unfortunately, for the electricity, but certainly the club, I know, can't afford it. So there is the will for that. The key anywhere on any of our municipal properties, whether it's out on the trails, the beaches, the roadways, it's always about safe passage. It's always about safety. And with that is cooperation, whether it's traffic safety or pedestrian, dog walking, whatever. It's all about cooperation. So I really want to thank those who've weighed in tonight. You've all brought up very, very good points. To Mr. Burgess' comment about a timeline, I think 1 year is definitely a good length of timeline. Keeps the doors open, and certainly we would anyways, and gives us more opportunity to come to the table, as has happened previously, because the club and the museum have met twice, and included the user groups as well. So I would, I'd love to be able to move forward on option 1 tonight, and so that both clubs can continue doing what, or not clubs, both societies can continue doing what they do to contribute to the ambiance of the nature of our community. Okay.
Did you want to put forth a motion?
I would like to move that Council approve the 1-year renewal as the CFO, interim CAO, has written in her report, with the 5 meter in place for that 1 year.
There's already, Jay has already moved that motion.
Oh, have you?
Well, I didn't actually officially move it. I spoke to it. Yeah.
Okay.
I spoke to it.
That's fine. So moved by Councillor Donaldson. Would anybody like to second the motion of option number 1?
Second for discussion.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor Epp for discussion. Go ahead.
Well, I would. I mean, I really appreciate all the passion and all the work that goes into both of these things, and the museum society has done an amazing job in the last while, especially with the schoolhouse, but with the other museum, with the barn as well. It's really incredible. So it's hard to sit here and say, well, one or the other is right, and I don't think that's the case. So I mean, I would approve the motion, but I would like to have, so maybe it would even be number 3, but I'd like to add that there be a definite plan moving forward through that year, that Councillor Shukin, as in the user groups or in his portfolio, really make a definite plan to meet with the groups, to do the measurements, to check out the trailer parking and the distances required, and work with the Museum Society about their plans coming up for the future. So I don't know if that needs to be, anything like that needs to be included in the motion or not.
Thanks, Councillor App. I would happily take that on, and it would be great to be able to sit down. I would be happy to chair or facilitate a meeting with the Museum Society and the equestrians. And if we wanted to build that into the motion, I'd be happy to do that. Maybe we could do it as a second motion, though. We could approve.
Sure. We can do that as a second motion. That's fine.
Is that...
Would that be okay with you, Councillor Epp?
Does it need to be here?
It's easier to discuss it. It's all
Yeah.
Just put,
I'm just trying to think about. I'm just trying to think about the wording. Yeah. Yeah. Well. Again, I think the wording would go something like: Council approves the 1-year renewal of the lease agreement, and also that Councillor Shukin will coordinate a meeting or meetings with the two organizations to discuss to discuss the future of this the setback issue.
Right.
Okay.
Okay. And take measurements as well.
Pardon me?
And take measurements as well. I don't think we can afford surveys. They're very expensive.
I don't know if I would commit to that. I think we should start by discussion. Okay. So I mean, measurements may be in order, absolutely, but we should begin with discussion first.
Okay. So that's the motion, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Just a moment. Sue Lynn, did you want to weigh in on this? Can you borrow the microphone, please?
Okay. Well, first of all, I want to thank you both groups for such passion and speaking thoroughly to the leases. That has really made my job a little easier, because it does involve the lease that is involving the Equestrian Society. So really, I have nothing more to add to the discussion.
Okay. Anybody else wish to add comment to this?
Could we just get clarity on the motion? Is it multiple meetings or one single meeting? What's proposed here?
I said meeting or meetings, so it could be. I
suspect it'll be meetings.
It'll be meetings. Yes, it'll be meetings.
Plural.
Yeah. Thanks.
Okay, I will say that we already have had meetings with the Metchosin Equestrian Society and the Museum Society. There was one meeting that I was at, another meeting that I was invited to, so that had taken place. So there have been, actually there's been meetings, and so that all that information will be carried forward for you as well. And I ask that both groups work together on this. Okay, so I'm going to, yes.
I just wanted to raise a few points. So I first want to just make it clear that we're discussing two contracts, and one contract we don't have before us tonight. So I'm not sure if that's a point of order, but there's just an issue here that we seem to be making comparisons and making decisions without the full information in front of us, making me question the validity of a vote this evening on this motion. So that's a little bit difficult, but maybe we can pick that up in a minute. This agenda item is Council's very first public review of a contract lease we have with a volunteer group in Metchosin to use our facilities in support of building community. The motion to approve a 1-year renewal on old terms is not agreeable at first blush to the Museum Society. How do I see the situation? You were talking about how you see the situation, Mayor Little. How I see the situation is that the volunteer Metchosin Museum Society wants to renew their lease without making any changes in the current contract terms. The motion we're looking at now removes almost 80 square meters of property from their lease because they didn't have that land in their lease until 2 years ago. But they're in full compliance with their current lease. They've met all the terms of keeping things well maintained. They're out there constantly offering books for sale, best book buys probably in the whole CRD. They're taking care of our heritage artifacts and improving displays all the time. They just finished a great job with the old school museum. Like, wow. Why impose a contract on them? They're in the midst of planning a new roof over their heritage farming artifacts. I don't think we need to get in their way at this time. There was a lot said about pedestrian access, but I didn't hear anybody from the Museum Society suggest they were going to have people out outside the fenced area. In fact, people may well enter inside a fenced area and be quite safe and distant from the horses and the trailers. I think that it would be more fair to give us more time to negotiate a few changes to their leases that both parties can agree to. When I mean that, the district and the Museum Society. It might take a little more time, but I think worth the effort. They have little power in this negotiation, so the process becomes quite important. That's why I mentioned meetings plural. I hope it goes without saying that the Museum Society may or may not put up the proposed roof that they're talking about. But they would prefer to continue their planning work on the idea before we barge in and reduce the field of opportunity. This decision is material to the Museum Society. I'm not sure if it's material to us. Let's again run over the facts. The Museum Society has a valid contract, providing them 8 meters of property down one side of the Pioneer Museum Old Barn building. To the best of my knowledge, the district and no one at this table is disputing the validity of the current contract and accepts that the Museum Society's current lease boundary line extends 8 meters from the building. Adopting the motion that's on the table right now asks us to accept an assumption that the 8-meter notation typewritten on the map is a typo, and that today's contract is, while valid, inappropriate to review unchanged. Let's test that assumption and see what else we might find. First, everyone needs to understand or recognize that the fence line is 5 meters from the building and the road is 8 meters from the building. Is the Museum Society boundary line properly the fence or the road? We're being asked to accept that the fence line is at 5 meters. Let me clarify how the fence location doesn't help us to know whether or not 8 meters is a typo. Where would you put the fence line if 5 meters was the property border? Well, you'd probably put the fence 5 meters from the building. Where would you put the fence line if 8 meters was the property border? Well, there's a road there, so maybe 3 meters away. Maybe you put the fence exactly where it is today, 5 meters from the building. It would make perfect sense. We've heard a lot about safety tonight, and naturally the fence would be offset from the road. I hope you get the point. For me, I see no discrepancy between the current contract showing an 8-meter boundary line and the location of the fence at 5 meters. Now let's look at the map itself. It's in front of many people, or at least the council. I'm not sure if everybody else has it, but it's worth a look. I'm just going to grab the old one too. So this is the last contract. The site map was tiny. You can see it there in the very corner if you squint carefully. That's right, that tiny little square there. You can barely make out, but with a big magnifying glass, you can see the 5-meter line in the old contract. Something happened between the two parties, the district and the Museum Society. They blew up the map so you could see all the details. Now you can clearly see that it's 8 meters. The reason we blow up maps generally is so that we can see exactly what's going on. And you can see the number there. It's typewritten 8 meters. There's a bunch of other numbers on this very same graph, and I guess what I'm saying is that when I look at the note we had, it says, well, there's a typo there. I don't think that's a typo. Let's look at the other numbers on the map. The map says the width of the property is 16.4 meters. This consists of 2 meters away from the building on the farmer's market side, plus the building width, that I measured by tape, it was 6.3 meters. So that means the property extends 16.4 minus 2 minus 6.3, 8.1 meters on the side of the building with a fence. So the numbers are all internally consistent, suggesting there was no error made. The idea that there would be 2 or 3 precisely related typos on the same numbers on the map, it beggars belief. So tonight I prefer to acknowledge that the current contract was in all likelihood pursuant to an agreement between the parties, the district and the Museum Society, to update the boundary line from 5 to 8 meters as noted in the contract. Well, what else? Looking now just at the new map that we're being asked to sign this evening or approve this evening, the site map in the proposed contract does not show the bookstore, which, guess what, extends 4.3 meters over the boundary line in this map. It extends 4.3 meters towards the farmer's market from the old barn building, 2.3 meters outside this boundary map. So it makes it difficult to approve this exact contract that's before us tonight. This should be corrected, and also it does mean adjusting the lease boundary line as well. So you'd have to draw in the old barns market and adjust the boundary line for us to make approval of the contract. The scale of the site map is stated as 1 to 1,000. It is not. That needs to be recalculated and corrected. The farmer's market bandstand is missing from the map. It's important because it's half inside the Museum Society boundary and half outside by agreement between the Museum Society and the farmer's market. But it should be there so we can understand what's going on. I'm not suggesting a surveying at all exactly for these numbers. They're all plainly obvious for us to see tonight by just looking at the map. Also, the site map shows clearly that a portion of the roadway at the building corner is included in leased property. I am disinclined to include the roadway in a renewed contract. In my view, none of the roadway should be leased to a community group. It should be available for the public to use at all times. This is also important because the road is used, as we heard tonight, by the Equestrian Society and the members who have substantial size rigs to haul their horses and all the gear, Kathy. It's also important because, well, I guess what I'll say is this contract at the moment, or this map anyway, is a dog's breakfast. It's not really ready for signing as is. Just a few more comments on the boilerplate and the body of the contract. So I think clause 18 on insurance needs to be more specific. I think we need to specify that insurance we need to see is third-party liability. At the moment it just says get insurance, or it says all licensees shall provide proof of insurance. I would say that needs to change to say that third-party liability insurance, and the district should be named as a co-insured to at least $5 million. That's what you have in your car insurance, liability these days. Many people do. The contract is missing something called an entire agreement clause, which I think is necessary given all the talk tonight about maybe it's right, maybe it's not right. So an entire agreement clause tells you this is the contract, there's no other contract. It's also missing what we call an extension clause. And I think we need this in all of our leases. An extension clause is in case we find ourselves in the situation we're having tonight, which is we just like to make things easier if there's a dispute in terms of renewal. It allows you to just keep going for a little bit longer to figure things out. So those are revisions that might be good to make in the contract body. How can we move forward and get this lease signed? The contracts need to be cleaned up. I hope that's clear to everyone. There are too many loose ends. We need to have good faith discussions with the Museum Society about their contract and be sure everything is noted, for example, on the map, to our mutual satisfaction. Contract renewal makes sense for a short period of time than is typical, and I think the 1 year makes sense. We can use that short renewal period of 1 year to fix up the contract. As has been pointed out tonight, I think the use of the property isn't a problem at the moment. There's no real world problem that we have to change the line tonight. There's nothing going on. The rigs are coming in and dropping their horses. People seem to be happy being there. There's a bit of an edge to some of the comments in terms of what should be done, but I take it people are able to pull in, do their horses, and the Museum Society is doing okay too at this point. So I don't see a real world problem that we're paying attention to. But there is this major issue about the overlap of lease between the Museum Society and the Equestrian Society. I made a passing reference to this at our last meeting under agenda item 8A, when we were discussing the appointment of Councillor Donaldson to be the liaison for the farmers market rather than Councillor Shukin. When I look at the lease of the Metchosin Equestrian Society, I see that their property line is also disputable. By the way, I don't have it here to show you because I'd understood only the documents we had available were what we were to speak to, but having heard everything tonight, I think it's fair to say that while the boundary lines in the Equestrian Society contract map run mostly in the middle of the road, there is more, that is more than 8 meters from the building. There's a handwritten notation indicating that their property boundary line is 5 meters from the building. Uh-oh. If we take both leases at face value, the leases overlap by roughly 3 meters, except that the 5-meter handwritten distance notation on the equestrian map in their contract is not initialed by either signator of the contract. Then Mayor John Rands and then President of the MES, the Equestrian Society, Councillor Donaldson. Why is it not initialed? Was it written on the map after the parties signed? I don't expect we will ever be able to find out. And that's why people generally, if they make notations in handwriting on corrections or adjustments to contracts, they initial it so that we know it's valid. If we renew the Museum Society lease on the same as current terms tonight at 8-meter property line boundary, I guess I'd like to make a subsequent motion to refer all of this to the Planning Committee so that a proper review of both contracts can be done after appropriate consultation with both parties. I guess I feel like we should remove the roadway from both contracts so that the road is available at all times for the public, for emergency use vehicles, and that we'll have access to it. And I'm not saying the trucks shouldn't get in there and do all their work in that, but the road is a road that needs to be there for all the purposes that everyone knows beyond the two groups. So if we were to renew the contract under current terms, the Museum Society would be able to continue its planning uninterrupted. I don't quite get the sense, once we change the contract, how can they make the plan for whatever they're going to do about the roof? They're cut back, so it doesn't make sense to do the planning at that point. But there's still the question, should the roof come or not? And I feel like as we listened, and I don't apologize by saying, it seems we've drifted into whether or not the roof should go on the barn rather than what the lease should look like in terms of the safety questions that were raised earlier. I'm not aware of safety issues today other than the normal ones that exist. So I guess we get to the politics then. We're a new council. I want us to demonstrate tonight that we take our volunteer groups seriously, that we value them. I've identified a bunch of corrections and adjustments needed to the current contract. I don't think tonight's the night to cherry pick one irritation. Oh, that's the one. Not causing any real world problems to anybody, as I've said, and leave the rest for another day. Do them all or do none of them. This is going to take a bit of time. That's why I was interested in renewing on current terms for a short period, but I didn't get a seconder for that motion. Let's get this whole thing to the Planning Committee to take a complete look at it so that we see what we can do. I heard a number of people say, can't we work collaboratively? Can't we solve this? I'd like to support that viewpoint. I want to do community building, strengthen communications, and support our volunteers in their service to the community. We got to recognize too that the idea of building a roof, well, it's not going to happen unless we approve it. So if there's a new roof to be done, the council will be approving that. We might not agree with it. I am not tonight expressing any support whatsoever for a roof or not. I haven't seen the proposal. I don't even know if there's one written up. I'll keep an open mind when that comes forward. I simply don't want us to interrupt the museum's planning, them from considering how best to care for their artifacts and show them off and degrade their lease before they can get to it. We must be careful as we work with our most important asset, our community volunteers. As the district, we can change that contract whether the Museum Society wants it or not. We have all the power. We just do it, they'll need to suck it up. We impose our terms, I guess. My preference is to reach an agreement with them, and it sounds like it should be with them, also with the Equestrian Society, so that we get something that most people can live with. I heard a number of people say, I think we can do that. So why don't we work towards that rather than imposing something? The process is important. It's the process that helps us move to reaching a deal that's acceptable to all parties. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Councillor Gray, for your thorough commentary. I
I think we need to move on with the motion and the amendment that Councillor Epp did, and have the community planning person take this forward and work with both societies, as we had already discussed, and bring all of that and everything else from the previous meetings. There have been 2 official meetings with both societies, and there'll be more information that will come out with the contracts as they are, including 20 years worth from the equestrians, which Councillor Shukin already has possession of.
Right. Okay, and I hear you. I hear your comments. I hear your concerns. And one of the things that you mentioned that was so important was process and approval. And I've asked, where in the minutes of the council of the day was this approved? And the Museum Society wasn't able to come up with that. Neither was the Metchosin Equestrian Society. I also looked. So policies, procedures are always based on council resolution, and that is missing. So the fact of the matter is the lease for the Museum Society always stated 5 meters. All of a sudden, it was changed to 8 meters, and the same consideration wasn't if you take if you give 3 meters here in a finite space, you've got a takeaway here. That was not done. That's all. Those are the basic facts, and we can't find any documentation, which I always like to deal with. We can't find any documentation except for the revised map, and so that's what we're left to deal with. I think we're actually in agreement, Councillor Gray, that we should move forward with a 1-year term lease so that they can get on with their business, so they can have the correct insurance, and they're addressing their liability issues. It doesn't prevent them from planning for the future. I think we've stated a number of times they're valuable to our community, both as volunteers, as the Museum Society, and that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is facts, and what I'm looking at was the Metchosin Equestrian Society map. I was looking at the historical. Can I just finish, please? What I was looking at is the Metchosin Equestrian Society maps, and then I was looking at the Metchosin Museum Society maps, and there was a change all of a sudden. That's just the facts, and that's the position that we're in right now. We have finite space. One contract says this, the other one contract says that. Councillor Gray.
I'm not sure that we do agree. And I'm not sure that we can proceed. Now we're referencing the maps like crazy here. We don't have the maps in front of us. Could I get some advice from the CAO? Can we make a decision without the maps in front of us? Because they form such a basis of this discussion. It seems like we're making the change to accommodate a contract which you don't have in front of us. If we were making the change for some other reason.
I think so the question before council today is based solely on the Museum Society's license of occupation. As including your package, we see the discrepancy between the distance from the the building itself. So that is the recommendation or documentation that have been provided for council to move forward. So I recognize that along with your questions and questions from the Equestrian Society, that lease keeps coming up. However, today we're not discussing the renewal of that lease. That is the reason that that information wasn't included in your package.
Could I ask then, Councillor Shukin, why are we moving the line?
We're moving the line because the line is the 8-meter setback is in conflict with the Metchosin Equestrian Society lease agreement.
And why wasn't that in the package?
I can't answer that.
I think you'll just have to take my word for it and take the interim CAO's word that on those maps it is stated at 5 meters. Yeah, go ahead.
I want to go back to what Councillor Donaldson was saying earlier, and that we have a motion on the table that this motion does allow for specifically mentions further dialogue between the two groups. One of the things that we do have to talk about, of course, is the physical reality that the equestrians have pointed out, that extending to that 8-meter line is going to prove challenging in terms of safety, in terms of moving trailers, so that it isn't an abstract point. It's something that we have to work out. Now, I believe we can work it out, but the motion on the table does allow for dialogue on that. So I think we've talked about this significantly, and I ask that you call the question, Mayor Little, but I'll leave that decision to you.
Okay, so saying everybody has had a chance to speak, did you want to say something again, Councillor Epp?
I would just add that I think it's important to move forward with this because of the liability issues and the fact that the museum and the book barn need to remain open safely.
Okay, with that, I'm going to call the question. All in favor of the motion on the table, which is, just to reiterate, that Council approved the 1-year renewal. There will be dialogue at the community planning portfolio meetings, plural, with the Metchosin Equestrian Society and the Museum Society. In the future, there'll be consultation in collaboration with direction from staff. How's that? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, next item is this is the staff report, license of occupation. This is the Metchosin School Museum. So we were dealing with the barn. This is for the license of occupation for the Metchosin School Museum, which is on page 31. And don't get up and leave because we're going to be doing cricket next. So, okay, so on page 31, this is for a 5-year renewal. The district has granted a license of occupation to the Metchosin Museum Society for the school museum since 1998. And it is renewing the license of occupation for 5 years. So the options are here. What say you?
I move option 1, that Council approves the 5-year renewal.
Moved by Councillor Epp, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Discussion. All in favor? Oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if it might be worth approving this motion, but asking the contract be changed if it were there's the Museum Society people are here tonight to change the liability to $5 million and name us as co-insured.
Councillor Epp.
Councillor Gray's brought up quite a bit about the contracts. The thing is, the contracts, possibly it's not a bad idea for staff to have a look at all the contracts. Like, it's not just the Museum Society, but there's the cricket, there's the Community Association, and the others as far as the liability and the wording, rather than just focus on one.
Okay, Councillor Donaldson.
I think that's a good point, but a note of reference, the MAS contract, we're required, and we actually put it ringside, we're required to have $5 million. Everybody sees that before they even go into the ring. That's why you have to have things like memberships and layers of insurance for this particular municipality. I believe their contract probably says that, but certainly we should bring them all up to code, up to par.
Okay, I'm just going to ask staff and the Museum Society, can we include the requirement for the $5 million liability at this point?
We can definitely amend the license of occupation if council wishes.
Okay, and ordinarily we don't reach out to the public during a meeting, but I'm going to ask Jim, Mr. MacPherson, would that be amenable to you?
The insurance part of it is amenable enough, but the map on the Schoolhouse Museum is not correct. The native plant garden is not included within the
yeah. that's true. And that I should have picked up on that because that was on my parks agenda. I apologize. Yes, okay. We still need to renew this. So we both know. How about if I work with Judith Van Mennen to add that, what we called the annex portion that was annexed into the schoolhouse. Sorry about that. I apologize. I didn't even notice. So with that, we'll change the map on that, and then is it okay with you if you increase your insurance to?
I think that's fair enough, but I would like to suggest also that with this lease and with any other lease, that there be greater clarity in terms of the municipal responsibility for structural repairs. The municipality owns the museums.
Mm-hmm.
That is the only statement coming anywhere near an assumption that the district assumes responsibility for the physical repairs and damages that might occur.
Okay.
I mean, we take responsibility for care, maintenance, upkeep, all of that day-to-day stuff. But if you need a new roof, if you have an earthquake, if somebody runs their car into the museum, those are structural issues which it is not clear who's responsible for those.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, yes?
And I think that mirrors what Gary referenced early on, that we need to have that laid out in the contracts. It's not too difficult a concept. We're on the capital side, you guys are on the maintenance side. I don't know if that could be addressed between our staff and the Museum Society for us.
Okay, so is everybody clear with the motion on the floor? So this is for the 5-year renewal. I'm going to work with Judith Van Mennen to amend the map. The Museum Society will be taking additional insurance up to $5 million. I'll work with staff on that, and that is the motion on the table.
Yeah, and we'd be co-insured.
We'll be co-insured. Is that acceptable, Sulin?
Yes, it is.
Okay. Okay. So with that, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to the next one. So this is item number 8C. This is the staff report, license of occupation for the Metchosin Cricket Society on page 37. Okay, so the district grants a license of occupation to the Metchosin Cricket Society. The current lease expires also on December 31st of this year, and staff is proposing a 3-year renewal for the license of occupation. So that would be from January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2025. We have a number of different options here. I would recommend option number 1. And if you're going to ask me the question, why 3 years versus 5 years, I don't know. I don't know, and staff, they weren't sure why that was a 3-year term of their former leases. Okay.
I would move option 1.
Okay, moved by Councillor Shukin, seconded by Councillor Epp. Discussion. Yes.
I noticed that clause 13 on page 41 of our agenda package talks about juveniles, and I think this is about safety, so that the licensee, that's the cricket club, will ensure that a responsible adult has authority over the group, and this adult shall remain with the group while it remains on premises. And I just wondered, we're dipping here into the question of safety for the children or juveniles, and I wondered, where does the boundary, that's sort of starting off, that sort of saying now the district has an interest in that. First one, make sure that with an adult, but going down the line, there's things like what equipment people should have, the criminal record checks done for the adults and supervision, other questions like that, and I'm just not sure. I wonder if we know any history of why this clause is in here rather than just simply leaving it to the cricket group to do that. So I'm just concerned that we're drifting into something that's probably more properly the purview of the Cricket Society and not us.
Yeah, I don't know why. Actually, I suspect that one could get quite hurt during a cricket match with the balls as they're thrown. They can go in all sorts of directions. They do have pads. Perhaps I'll ask Mr. Carline, since he's in the gallery.
So Johnny, my question is, why are we contracting you for this clause rather than leaving it up to you to deal with that yourselves?
I don't know, and I would be quite happy if you deleted that.
Okay. Okay. Okay, so we can have that deleted mutual. I'm sure it was there for a reason, but I don't know that. Oh, no? Okay. Okay, with the deletion of clause 13.
So Johnny, you're here tonight. Would you go $5 million for us on the liability and co-insured?
The insurance in the cricket process is actually provided by the Vancouver and District League, and they have every player and every umpire register and acknowledge that that is the insurance level that they're at. And I couldn't tell you, I should know, but I couldn't tell you what the actual level is, but it is it's set by the Vancouver and District Cricket thing, and we just pay our.
Okay.
In other words, it may be more than this, in fact.
It could be. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else would like to comment? With that, I'll call the question with the deletion of clause number 13. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay, moving on in the agenda package to the emergency capital expenditure request on page 45. Okay, so this is a request that council approve the additional capital expense request to replace the furnace for the old school site occupied by the Metchosin by MACA. So the recommendation is that council approve the capital funding request for the 2 new furnaces at the old school space occupied by MACA. So this was something that was sudden, something that wasn't planned for, and this is requiring an emergency capital expenditure request. Okay.
Mayor Little, thanks very much. I am prepared to vote in favor of the recommendation. I do have one question though, and I'm sorry, I'm not making a motion as yet. In terms of this expense, is there a policy that MACA may have followed to get a second quote for this work? And strangely enough, we had our furnace go down a number of years. Well, no, not even go down. Go looked at. And I think we were told we have a cracked heat exchanger. We got a second assessment, and the furnace was apparently fine. So sorry, it just always stuck with me. But I guess my question is, was there a second quote that was sought? So.
Yes, there was a second quote there. Yeah, there's our common practices to get 3 quotes. However, we were unable to get 3 quotes, so we did have additional quote, not just the one sole provider.
Thank you.
Okay. Would anybody like to move this?
I would move that council approve the capital funding request for 2 new furnaces at the old school to be occupied by MACA.
Okay, seconded by Councillor Donaldson. Anybody else want to comment? Councillor Gray.
Thanks. I'm going to vote in support of this motion, but I wanted to acknowledge the comment that Kelly Tordick made at a different meeting, I think it was, suggesting that we move to heat exchangers at the old school. The problem, Kelly, that occurred, I gather, was that this all happened very quickly, and a review to do heat exchangers would have been a much bigger job in terms of all of the duct work and all, sort of a much larger question. And so your comment and those ideas just came after the time I think things got going.
Yeah. Quite a high growth space.
Okay. So, any other comment? No? If not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you. Okay. And then next on the list is item number 10. This is correspondence from Morgan Yates, the Rural Economic Diversification and Infrastructure Program. This is correspondence on page 47 of your agenda package. So the request is for exceptional status. There's also a second request that the mayor have a direct engagement with the Honorable Mitzi Dean, the MLA for our area, in terms of this request. So would that be okay? Go ahead.
I move that the district seek confirmation from the REDIP program office that the rural community of Metchosin, in partnership with the Sienna First Nation, make application to the program as a specific exception to the guidelines, and that Mayor Little engage with our MLA for the same purpose.
Okay, so that's outlined in the letter that is on page 49 of your council package. Seconded by Council Epp. Discussion. Yes.
I'm in support of the motion. One question I ask though is how about if we should send the letter, but a phone call? Do we know who we might phone to get more of an immediate response to this, or at least test the waters as well? In terms of expediting this exception status? Yeah. I don't know, but I could ask staff. Actually, you mean a phone call while the letter's going out tomorrow? Sure. Okay. That's fine. Anybody else have any other comments? With not, I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Good. Okay. And then other business, bylaws, and question period. We have 17 minutes. Does anybody have any questions that they would like to ask council? Everybody's exhausted from the discussion already. Okay, seeing none, I'll take and move a motion to adjourn the meeting. Moved by Councillor Gray, seconded by Council Epp. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you for a good discussion.